We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Hayam at Beis in Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 75b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a Braisa, and the Braisa excluded the Shtei HaLechem and the Lechem HaPanim from the halacha of Pesisa, which will be discussed more in the following Mishnah. And then the Braisa also excluded the Minchas Mafeh, the baked Mincha, that's excluded from the halacha of Yitzika. And the Gemara on the previous summit asked, why do we know to exclude the Minchas Mafeh from the halacha of Yitzika? Maybe the exclusion really is for the Minchas Kohanim. And the Gemara continues and answers, and this was mentioned by Rashi in the previous summit already. Amar Rabba says, Eizehu davar shetzarech shnei miyutin. What kind of mincha would require two exclusions? Haviyomer zu minchas mafeh. That would be the minchas mafeh. That's how we know the minchas mafeh is being excluded. And Rashi explains, Haviyomer zu minchas mafeh sheyesh ba shnei minin, because there are two types of minchas mafeh, as we mentioned on the previous amud. Chalos urakikin. There's the chalos and rakikin. Lefikach tzricha beis miyutin. That's why two exclusions are needed. Again, there were two words in the pasuk that function as exclusions over there. Hilkach kamemayit mehanach tre miyute. That's why we know this is the one being excluded from these two exclusions. And we will take a look at the Rashi Ksav Yad on this as well. Ezu davar shetzarech shnei miyutim. One needs two exclusions. That shnei mikros, aleho v'hi. The two exclusions are the word aleho and the word he, as was mentioned on the previous summit. Haviomer zu minchas mafeh. And again, one needs two exclusions. The minchas mafeh sheba mishnei minin. As we said, there are two kinds. It comes from two kinds, and therefore it needs two exclusions. And Rashi continues Vikasha. Now, if you're going to ask as follows, Gabe psisa nami lifroch. By psisa also, why don't we ask the same question? Emo lahotzi minchas Kohanim. Again, by Pesisa, we exclude the Shtei HaLechem and the Lechem HaPanim from Pesisa. Why not say that we should exclude? We should ask the same question. Let's exclude instead Minchas Kohanim. We only ask that question with regards to Yitzika, not with regards to Pesisa. And Rashi answers, Taurus, we can answer as follows. Mistabra Minchas Kohanim Havalei L'Rebuye. It makes sense that Minchas Kohanim would be included in the halacha of Pesisa. Kedin Minchas Machavas, just like a Minchas Machavas, just like a Pan Mincha, Shepsisa Ksiva Bo, where Pesisa is written. Why are those the same? Mishum D'Shteyen Minchas Yochid V'Nefesh Ksiva Parsha. They're both individuals Mincha, and it says Nefesh. V'Lemuute Shtei HaLechem V'Lechem HaPanim D'Tzibur Hein. And it makes sense to exclude Shtei HaLechem and Lechem HaPanim from Pesisa because those are communal. V'Gabe Yitzika, now by Yitzika Lo Tzarech Lemuute Shtei HaLechem V'Lechem HaPanim. There we don't need to exclude Shtei HaLechem and Lechem HaPanim. Shafilu Shemen Einon Tu'unin. They don't even need oil. Kedem Mamayit Lehu B'Perakol Menachos Bos Matzos, like we already said, is excluded again in Perakol Menachos Bos Matzos. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah describing the process of Pesisa, Minchas Yisrael, with regards to the Mincha of Yisrael, Kofel Echad L'Shnayim, Ushnayim L'Arba. The process is one folds a single loaf into two, and two pieces are then folded into four, Umavdil, and then one separates those four quarters. That's with regards to a Minchas Yisrael, and Minchas Kohanim, with regards to the Mincha of the Kohanim, so Kofel Echad L'Shnayim, one folds a single loaf, again into two, Ushnayim L'Arba, and then the two pieces into four, the Eino Mavdil, but over there he does not separate it into four quarters. And the Mishnah continues, Minchas Kohen Mashiach, with regards to the Minchas Kohen Mashiach, that's the Mincha of the Kohen Gadol, again that's the Chavisin, that's brought half in the morning and half in the afternoon, so over there, Lo Haya Makafla, one does not fold it. And the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Minchas Kohanim or Minchas Kohen Mashiach, with regards to the Minchas Kohanim and the Mincha of the Kohen Gadol, so there, Ein Bohen Pesisa, there's no halacha Pesisa, and what's the reason why there's no halacha Pesisa by the Minchas Kohanim and the Minchas Kohen Mashiach? According to Rabbi Shimon, the reason is Mibnei She'ein Bohen Kamitza, because there is no Kamitza over there. V'chol She'ein Bohen Kamitza, anytime you have no Kamitza, Ein Bohen Pesisa, so there is no halacha Pesisa, there's no halacha of breaking it into pieces. And finally, the Mishnah says, V'chulon, with regards to all of them, Posas on Kezesim, they are broken into pieces that are the size of an olive. And Rashi explains, Kofel kemo kofel, it's like kofel with a chaf, like kefel, like doubling or folding over. The idea is kofel chalo achas l'shtayim, u'shtayim li'arba, you fold it over one into two, and two into four, and we'll take a look at the Rashi Ksav Yad as well. Kofel, here Rashi says, Meshabra, one breaks it. Now the commentaries note that one is not actually breaking it at this point, because that's coming again later in the process. The whole description is that one folds it 1 to 2 and 2 to 4, and then mavdil, then separates it into four quarters. And so the commentaries say it just means means that one folds it in a way that it will be able to be broken. Umavdil, and then there's a separation. Again, like by the Minchas Yisrael, it's folded 1 into 2, and then Shnayim li'arba, 2 into 4, and then it says Mavdil, that they're separated into those quarters. And Rashi explains Mishum Deboy Kamitza, that's because Kamitza is required, that's why there's a separation. But Minchas Kohen, but with regards to the Minchas Kohen, Eino Mavdil, there's no separating, Mishum Delo by Kamitza, because Kamitza is not required. V'chulan poses on Kezesim, and again, all of them, the Mishnah ended, they're all broken into pieces the size of an olive. Psisin dakos kezayis, again, it means these small pieces of a kezayis. Rabbi Shimon Kamar, now this is actually Rabbi Shimon talking, uvetarti pligi. Rabbi Shimon's arguing actually on 2 points. Again, Rabbi Shimon argues with regards to the Minchas Kohanim and the Minchas Kohen Mashiach, where he says there's no psisa at all, and therefore, and again, the rule is that if there's no kamitza, then there's no psisa. And then there's a second point that Rabbi Shimon is making about chulan pos and kezesim, that the size of the pieces that they're broken into is the size of a kezayis. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught on a brisa, pasos, the pasuk says pasos, to break it, yachol l'shnayim, one might think that it should be broken into 2 pieces. Talmud lomar pitim, the pasuk says pitim, and therefore we understand that it's 4 pieces. Now, pitim, now if it just said pitim, yachol yasena perurin, one might think that one should reduce it to crumbs. Talmud lomar, the pasuk says osa, it says break it into pieces, and the idea is osa lipsisim, it means that the mincha itself should be broken into pieces, v'lo psisa lipsisim, but the pieces should not be broken into pieces. So haketzad, how so? How does one fulfill this pasuk? Minchas Yisrael kofel echad l'shnayim u'shnayim li'arba. By the mincha of Yisrael, again, it's folded 1 to 2, 2 to 4. It's essentially 4 pieces umavdil, and it is separated, as we said. And the brisa continues, and the gears of the Chazon Ish over here is Minchas Kohen Mashiach, the Mincha the Kohen Gadol, Hayam Mekafla Lebeis, it's folded in 2. And in the Mishnah, again, the gears that we had in the Mishnah was that the Minchas Kohanim is folded into 4, Ve'eno Mavdil, and it's not separated. And the Mincha the Kohen Gadol is not folded at all. That's what our Mishnah said. And here we're saying that the Mincha of the Kohen Gadol is folded in 2. And so the Gemara asks, Va'anon Tanan Lo Hayam Mekafla, but in our Mishnah it says the Mincha of the Kohen Gadol is not folded at all. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rabba says, Eino mekafla le'arba, that simply means it's not folded in 4. Avol mekafla l'shnayim, but it is in fact folded in 2. And so therefore, again, the Minchas Kohanim in general is folded in 4 and not separated, and the Mincha the Kohen Gadol, that is folded in 2. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Minchas Kohanim u Minchas Kohen Mashiach, the Mincha of Kohanim, and the Mincha of the Kohen Gadol, Ein Bahen Pesisa, there is no halacha psisa. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef says, Hai Chavitza, with regards to Chavitza was a cooked dish, and there were pieces of bread in the dish. To Isba Perur and Kazayas, so if the pieces are a Kazayas large, Mevarchina le hamotzi lechem min aretz, then the bracha is hamotzi. Ilesba Perur and Kazayas, but if the pieces are not a Kazayas, Mevarchina le bori minei mizonos, then the bracha is bori minei mizonos. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yosef says, Meno aminullah, from where can I show that this is true? The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Hayomiru makriv menachos b'Yerushalayim, a person is standing and bringing karban minchas in Yerushalayim. Omer baruch shechayanu v'kiyimanu, he says the bracha of shechayanu, we'll see Rashi in a moment on that. Netalan la'achlan, now if he's taking these minchas to eat the remnant of the mincha, so then he says, Hamotzi lechem min aretz, he says the bracha of hamotzi. So here we have clearly that the eating of a karban mincha, the bracha is hamotzi. Utanan, and what do we say in our Mishnah? We said v'kulam psisim b'kazayis. We said that with regards to breaking up the karban mincha, the pieces are a kazayis, and so therefore you see pieces that are kazayis, the bracha is hamotzi. But the Gemara continues. Amar le Abaye said to him, he said to Rav Yosef, ulatana devei Rabbi Shmuel. But what about according to the Tana of Rabbi Shmuel? The Amar mefarchan ad shemachzirin l'salt, and he says that the mincha is broken up until it's essentially like flour, broken up into pieces much smaller than a kazayis. So hachanami de lo mevarach hamotzi, are you going to say that according to the Tana of Rabbi Shmuel that there's no bracha of hamotzi? V'chitema hachanami, if you're going to say indeed that is the case, that it's not a bracha of hamotzi in that situation, v'atanya, but we learned in a different brisa, and we'll see Rashi in a moment in terms of what this brisa exactly is talking about. But the brisa says liket mikul and kazayis. Let's say a person collects, you have small pieces of bread less than a kazayis, but you collect them, so now you have a total of a kazayis, va'achalo, and then he eats it. Im chametzu anish kares. If it's chametz, then there's a punishment of kares, and that's talking about on Pesach. And in matzah, if it's matzah, matzah, so Adam Yotze ben Yedei Chovaso b'Pesach, one can fulfill his obligation on Pesach. And the Gemara here is assuming that shows that these pieces less than a kazayas, but since all together they accumulated to a kazayas, so that apparently is considered significant. It's significant enough to get kares if it's chametz, it's significant enough to fulfill the obligation if it's matzah, and so therefore it should be significant enough to make the bracha of hamotzi. And the Gemara says, well, actually in this situation, what actually happens is he combined it in a way where essentially it became one again. And that's why in this situation we say that there's kares, we say yotzi yedei chovaso b'Pesach. It wouldn't be a proof to our situation. He essentially reformed it. But the Gemara says, if so, hainu dekatani Allah v'hu sha'achlon b'chdei achilas pras. It says that he eats them b'chdei achilas pras. That's a certain amount of time that generally one has to eat the kazayas. But it says it in plural. It sounds like they're different pieces. Now, if the situation over here is that he essentially reformed those bits of bread into a single dough, so shachalomi boile, shouldn't it say shachalo in singular? He eats it. It's now one. It's not many pieces. And so that doesn't make any sense. And so then we're back to our question. Here you have pieces less than a kazayis, apparently have significance. And so the Gemara instead answers, Ella rather, hacha b'mayaskin, on here, what is the case that they have significance? It's beba milechem gadol. That's only because they come from a larger bread. There was a larger piece of bread, and that's what they came from initially, so they still have that significant status. The Gemara continues, Mahavela, well, what's the conclusion in terms of the bracha? Rav Sheisha says, Afilu peirurin she'ein bahen kazayis, even if it's pieces that are less than a kazayis, still you're going to make hamotzi. Amar Rava says, V'hu de'ika torisa denahama alayu, but that's only true if it has torisa denahama, and what that means is that torisa denahama is the appearance of bread. As long as it has the appearance of bread, so then again the bracha is going to be hamotzi. And Rashi Ksav Yad explains, chavitza, what is chavitza? Tavshil, shakar, and shlonkik, that's a tavshil, it's a cooked dish, shemefarn pas, which again there are pieces of bread in there. Peirun kazayis, devechad pir ika kazayis. Peirun kazayis means that one piece is a kazayis. There are pieces of bread, and those individual pieces are a kazayis. Hayaomed, again, then the Gemara brought a brisa which said that if one is standing and bring a mincha, he says shechayanu. What's the shechayanu? So Rashi first says, Hayaomed kohen shalohevi mincha b'shanazu. We're talking about a kohen who never brought a mincha this year, so he says a bracha of shechayanu. Lishnachrin, another way of explaining Yisrael, shalohevi mincha miyamav. It could be Yisrael, and he never brought a karban mincha. Netalan la'achlan kohen. Now, who's eating a mincha? It's a kohen. The kohen's the one that eats the mincha. Utanan b'masnisin v'kulan posen b'kazesim. And what does it say in our Mishnah? The pieces in the mincha are kazayis. Alma psisin kazayis mevarchina lein hamotzi. You see that if the pieces are kazayis, the bracha is hamotzi. Mefarchan lemenachos la'achar afiyas, and he breaks up the mincha after it's baked. Again, we saw an opinion of the Tana Devrei Bishmal that it's broken up very small. And then the Gemara brought a brisa, liket mikulan, if he collects from all these small pieces, apsisin she'ein ben kazayis kai, these are pieces less than a kazayis, and he collects them. V'lo esparish lan hecha. Now, we don't really know the context of this brisa. V'halek l'meimer da menachos kai. Now, we cannot say it's talking about a kara mincha. Tekatani v'im chametzu. It says if it's chametz, you get kares. V'chol ha-menachos bo'os matzah, but menachos in general are made from matzah. And in matzah, and if it's matzah, al machashivi. The point is, we see that this is significant, even though it's pieces less than a kazayis, they can combine. And the Gemara initially answered Keshe'erson, which means Shaloshan, he essentially needs them together. V'tzirfon yachad lekazayis shalom, combines them into a kazayis. And then ultimately the Gemara said the case is Baba milechem gadol, they come from a larger piece of bread. Peirurim pachos mikazayis, they're crumbs less than a kazayis, shepason milechem gadol, that he broke it off from a larger bread. Hein chashuvos agav avi, and those are considered significant because of where they come from, because of their father, so to speak. T'chipason have belechem yoser mikazayis, because again, there was originally a lechem more than a kazayis. That's why he has to make hamotzi on the peirurin, shenatal min alechem, again on the peirurin that were taken from the bread. And then the Gemara asked, "My Havela, what's the conclusion to birchas hamotzi about hamotzi?" And the Gemara said, "Torisa denaham, it has to have toar maris lechem, it has to appear like bread." And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph.